The following is a presentation of KSL Sports. First and 12. A total roundup of BYU and Utah football and the expanded Big 12 Conference. Brought to you by Macy's Grocery Stores. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Alex Kirry on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports Zone.
Hour number 2 is off and running here on First and 12 on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports Zone. Appreciate all of you checking us out on your Sunday morning. Mitch Harper, Alex Kirry here as we have a weekly look at the Big 12 Conference. And if you miss any part of this show, subscribe to our podcast feed on the KSL Sports app or wherever you get your podcast. We're getting ready, Alex, for really, I think, still the biggest sporting event in this state. And that's noteworthy considering this is a two-pro sport town now with the Utah Hockey Club and the Utah Jazz. BYU, Utah meeting on the gridiron is a big deal, and now it's in the Big 12 Conference, and we'll be getting ready for that coming up on Saturday. And it gets us thinking about all the memories of this historic rivalry as it's now renewed in the Big 12.
So I talk about this all the time. I attended BYU as a student in the broadcast program, but I didn't grow up here. And that matters. Like, I didn't grow up a BYU fan. Neither of my parents went to BYU. Neither of my parents went to Utah. And that makes a difference. Like, I came in as kind of just a guy with fresh eyes who never thought I would even go to BYU in the first place. And coming into this rivalry, I did not have a good start on this one because I didn't have the background of, like, living and dying by, the 34-28 games, my very first, this is awful, my very first rivalry game as a student that I attended, because 2002 was up at Utah, was 2003, I want to say, or maybe it's 2004. No, either way, it was in Provo. It was the 3-0 game. It was the
2003.
worst. It was the worst game that I've ever attended in person. For the sake of BYU, when you're a student, you just want to go and take in the sights of the game. That 2003 game, Urban Meyer and Utah come into Provo. It was slushy. The high was like 38 degrees. It was like half snow, half rain, and it kept coming down. And the game was a mess, and the Utes ended up beating BYU 3-0. And I remember thinking to myself, I've been ripped off as a student. I need my money back. I need all this. But at the same time, like, you get so excited about this rivalry, but it was also a bad time when your team's not performing well. The Gary Croton years were already hard, and so that was so hard to take as a BYU fan. I think a lot of people looked at that game and they were like, "Oh boy, this is awful." You got Gary Croton who can't get his crap together. You lose to Utah 3-0, and from an all-time series perspective, Utah leads this series 62 games to 35. From BYU's perspective, from the record-keeping standpoint, Utah leads the series only 59 wins to 32. I don't know if the discrepancy there is I don't know what. I don't know why one school reports 59 wins for Utah. That's BYU reporting it. Utah reports that they've won 62 games. I don't know what to believe at this point.
Yeah, that just highlights how they can't agree on anything. BYU and Utah, they just can't get along, and it is a storied rivalry, and it's one that honestly I do believe, Alex, that Big 12 fans are eventually going to say, like, that's a bucket list game that maybe I want to, one day go see in my Big 12 travels, or just a one-off game, because this game does always live up to the hype, and it always lives up to, the billing of being a close game. There's so many games that have just gone down to the wire, and there's been controversial moments on the side too. I mean, and then in the social media era, about the last 15 to 20 years, there's been these sideshow antics with fans too, where you've got these, accusations of things in their and their candy bars, and then there's all this stuff like stories of Ute fans notifying administrators at BYU because a BYU linebacker was at a Vegas nightclub. You can't make this up. This is BYU Utah. It's just unreal. And on the same side, there's been stories of BYU fans getting in Kyle Whittingham's wife's face. I think that was in 2009.
Right.
Just insane stuff, and it makes people go crazy. And that's why we also love this game, because it's just there's so much passion. The stakes are always high, and now it's just leveled up in the Big 12. I think one of my favorite memories of this game, I will say that the old memories of Ron McBride and Lavelle Edwards.
Oh, yeah.
Were always good.
Kalani brought that up this week, right? That's something that he talked about during his press conference.
Yeah, those are just some good memories. And Kalani, it's interesting. He noted during his coach's show that he'd watch BYU Utah games out in Hawaii at a church satellite system, and that's his first memories of the game growing up as a kid. But those Lavelle, Ron McBride era, that's when the thing really ratcheted up in 1993, and Utah had that 34-31 win. And ever since then, it's just been back and forth, and it's just it's an epic game. And I hope that it continues to level up in the Big 12 era.
So, in terms of like really great games in this, like I try to think about games that are the most memorable and ones that come to mind. Obviously, like I remember very distinctly. I mean, covering the very first game I covered as an employee here at KSL was Beck to Harline. And, it was actually kind of nice because we're on the field and, you're just wearing the, the media, stuff, and you're just watching it from there. And I was in the opposite end zone, and so I'm watching the whole thing kind of go down from, 120 yards away. And I remember when it happened, I'd never – like you had just a pocket of BYU fans, but the entire place felt deathly quiet. You know what I mean? Like it was bonkers because it was so crazy. You had that small group of BYU fans going bonkers in the stadium, but man, it was a crazy finish. And that's what you want in games. You want crazy finishes. 54-10 was one of the worst stadium experiences I think that a lot of people have had. Covering the game, it was just dead. You know what I mean? Like it was just an absolute. It was a butt kicking from the beginning when Utah got after him, and it was a moment too in BYU and Utah history where BYU was just they were stagnant, right? I mean, independence was just such a weird time for BYU, and it just kind of pointed out like, hey, Utah's in this place, BYU's in this place, and they're two different places, and you knew that the difference was there, and then the score made that disparity even bigger. And so that 54-10 game was obviously the Las Vegas Bowl was quite a weird chapter in the rivalry because it was a bowl game. They faced off against one another. Utah was up 35-0, I think, with 6.5 minutes left in the first quarter. It was one of the weirdest starts to a game ever. Kalani was named the coach at the after party in Vegas, and so it was. This game brings wild endings, but that's what I want is close games. I don't just want a weird game or it's the idea that somebody has to be. The diminishing of the other side, that kind of stuff. I think it's good that Kalani understands what the reality of this rivalry is, which is not this Bronco Kyle vitriol, which is, I think, what you had, right? I think fans reflected the fact that those two coaches did not like each other, which is what you want in a rivalry, but at the same time, it didn't actually serve the rivalry very well because both of them pretended like that game wasn't as big of a deal as it actually was, and they tried to diminish the game itself, both sides, and it actually made it to where fans hated each other even more. I don't know. That's what it felt like to me, at least.
I agree. That stretch from 2005 to 2015, it was real nasty, and it was kind of it was a breath of fresh air when Kalani got in, just to give it a new feel, because Kalani and Whittingham, even though Whittingham will never say the letters BYU, he respects Kalani, and they've got a friendship together. I mean, those golf events in the summer, those two like each other a lot, and it has toned down these sideshow stories. I mean, you still get some of it with the fan bases after games. I mean, there was even one in the 2021 game, but it's a big deal. And Utah had a stretch there for 9 wins and it just felt like BYU could never get over the hump. And it was almost like a referendum on their independence. Like Utah was blowing past you. They're in the Pac-12. You're in this lowly independence world. So it felt like this big mental mind game for BYU. And then when they got the invite to the Big 12, 24 hours later, they're taking down Utah for the first time in 12 years. And that was a breakthrough moment for Kalani. And I'm curious to see if they can, create a streak now, or does Utah get back on track? Because Utah still won 90% of the last 10 meetings, and a few of them were blowouts. I mean, BYU, outside of the 2021 game, and that was still only a 9-point margin, they don't blow out Utah. You got to go back to 1996, the last time BYU beat Utah by 10 points. That was a 37-17 game,
wow.
which oddly enough had a number 12 at quarterback for BYU, a Southern California JUCO quarterback like this. So maybe there's some synergy there. And, oh, by the way, they wore those 96 uniforms this year. I'm just saying. I don't know. But it's a great game. And I think that it's underappreciated, I think, nationally. And hopefully as the years go by in the Big 12 Conference, this game can take on, bigger storylines nationally, because it's such a great game with so much history, and Tom Homo was never going to part ways with the game. So if it was never going to get parted ways with, if they were in separate leagues, might as well have it as a conference game where the stakes mean so much more.
I totally forgot in that 54-10 game. I don't know why, because I'm just one of these guys that likes to go back and look at all these box scores. BYU was up 10-7 in that game. I forgot about that.
Ross Alpo with a touchdown.
That's right. It was a 10-7 game at the outset of basically the second quarter. Midway through the second quarter, it was 10-7. BYU was up, and then Utah scores before the half. It was 14-10 at the half, and then Utah goes 40-0 in the second half.
The Wolfman, John White, was running wild.
John White,
and then the turnovers.
Don't worry, don't worry. JJ DeLuigi put the ball on the turf, I think, at least twice. So no problem. No problem. Cody Hoffman, nice day, 8 catches for 138 yards. But you didn't need to do much. There was so much. There was a scoop and score that Utah had. They had the. I think there was definitely a picked off pass for a touchdown. I think they scored at least 2 touchdowns on defense for Utah that day. So it was that was not a good one. But in terms of close games like this, I think of Kalani's time too. Was it the very first year of of his coaching where it was 20-19? Was that the Taysom?
Yes, they go for 2, and like the first drive of the game, BYU throws a pick 6.
Right.
And then they settled in. They had some drives. They were settling for some field goals, but then they got aggressive, and it was 20-19. They go for 2, and Taysom got stuffed.
Right. And it was
the 2-point attempt.
Kai Nakua got the targeting penalty, right?
Yes.
At some point in the game. I think it was it was kind of early in the targeting world. I don't know if he got thrown out of the game. Did they do? I don't know if I don't remember if they did that back then, but Kalani was on midfield throwing a tantrum. Do you remember this?
Yes.
It was.
And BYU fans loved it. They're like, "That's my coach."
That's
because
the new guy. Yeah, he's out there fighting. They were wearing, and it was when they went full Royals and Utah went full red. It was it was from a visual standpoint. It's what you begged for, just absolute royal blue versus totally Utah red. Everybody was into that one. But I try to think too. I think in the BYU. Do you remember a fake field goal in that game? Was it during that game, or was it I'm trying to think of one of the I'm trying to think. One of the Kafusi brothers caught a fake field goal that got BYU inside. It might have been that game, but there are things that happen in this rivalry that are just kind of inexplicable. There are things that happen that are part of the lore of how this thing just keeps going forward, and it's I hope that this year delivers as well. I know that Utah's down right now. That never matters. We've covered this enough to know that it never matters. And I'm not just doing the cliche throw the records out when these two teams get together type of talk. I'm saying it really does. It really gets wild in this game, and you have no idea how it's going to turn out.
I mean, right now Utah's got questions at quarterback, but Utah's had a history with quarterbacks that you don't expect to win big games. Brett Ratliff did it once upon a time in 2005, T.D. Croshaw in 1999, then John Hayes in 2012. Quarterbacks that, you thought, BYU's going to win this one. but Utah found a way,
Yep.
and they've always had a knack for producing. This is one of the lowest points I've seen Utah though going into this game, because it used to be like if Ron McBride could beat BYU, no matter what their record is, it's a successful year. That's not the case anymore, where that fan base has evolved and they have like different aspirations. So I don't know if this is solely enough for them, but still, I think that this would be okay. Even in our down years, we're beating BYU. We're getting back on track that way. So this is a big deal, and it's going to be a huge game. And I'm just curious to see how both these teams attack it. And I want to see, too, a clean game. Sometimes I hate when there's, like, a lot of flags, a lot of penalties. Like, just let's see a clean football game. Let's see how it plays out.
We'll take a break here. We'll come back. We've got more to go. When we come back, let's jump in and check in with what Kalani Sitake did say this week during his bye-week press availability. Stay right here with us. It's First and 12, 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone and KSL News Radio.
Read all the stories about BYU sports no one else has heard. Go to KSLSports.com for exclusive columns by BYU insider Mitch Harper. That's KSLSports.com.
Welcome back into First and 12, getting you ready for BYU and Utah, the rivalry week. Mitch Harper, Alex Kirry with you. And these are always fun on these Sundays, talking Big 12 football, but it's even more fun to think when we launched this show and we created this, Alex, we thought, it's a shame we can't talk more Utah because it'll be the Pac-12 for the Utes, but then shortly after this show was created, they got on board with the Four Corners, and now that means we get BYU and Utah an annual matchup.
Man. Let's go revisionist history on this thing, man. Let's just say we knew that the Big 12 was on the way to announcing these teams in there.
Good
I think
point.
what was it, like halfway through the season, or no, it was less than halfway through the season.
Camp. It was in fall camp.
It was in camp. We started doing the Four Corners roundup or whatever it was because we knew those teams were going to be
one.
Right, and so we were making sure they at least talk about those teams. But so I prefer to look at it like we were super ahead of our time with this show, Mitch. Come on.
It is true, and that's Brett Yormark would appreciate that visionist mindset that we have. We got to be additive. We got to be great. We're greater than 12.
You're Brett
Who's
Yormark,
next? We are.
You're Brett Yormark / Donald Trump. Like voices like meld together, and they're both about the same in terms of like those guys are both heavy self-promoters, and you can say a lot about them, but you know what? You have to give it to the fact that they can find their way to get publicity. So I mean, my goodness.
Oh. Yeah, this week is going to be nerve-wracking for many in the state of Utah with election night, and then you got BYU Utah on top of it. What a week it's going to be up here in the Wasatch Front. And a guy that tries to bring everyone together is head coach Kalani Sitake. He doesn't hate the rivalry. He just loves it all. So here's Kalani getting ready for the Utes.
8 games down and looking forward to the 9th game. I thought after the game, after watching the film, saw some really good things that we did. Really proud of the guys. I said it every week that I love the way the team is performing. I love the effort, the energy, the physical part of the game. I think we're embracing it. Obviously not error free, but man, there's some mistakes that we're making that just don't make sense. And so I talked to the coaches today about, and that's in all 3 phases. And so there's a lot of room for improvement. Still feel like we can play so much better, and really looking forward to getting that done this week and getting a lot of prep and work done this week, and just excited about the opportunity and excited about that. I mean, we don't play a game this week, but we're going to be focused early on our opponents, but more than anything, just before that even happens, we have to be ready for us to play much better as a team, and I think we can do that. What's nice is that I can count on the effort and the energy from our guys, the buy-in. Just need to keep focusing on the little things, the fundamentals of the game, just assignments, alignment, things like that, the technique. And so as we get that done and as we get towards, I mean, this is the 9th game coming up, so I'd like to see that a little bit better. And so that's on me and the coaching staff, and we'll get that working. But I do love the energy and the urgency from our players to want to make the plays. It just got to be a little bit more in the responsibility of their their areas, doing their 1/11th, not doing 2/11th. So you got to do one. So that we can focus on that. I think will be much better. We got the rivalry game, tough game coming up, and looking forward to the matchup. Obviously, I said it after the game in Florida that there's a lot of connections. That's just from us and them. We have a lot of friends that play and coach there, and so there's a great connection between the two schools. I mean, I mentioned that we need each other. That's been always the case, and now that we're in the same conference, it's going to be fun. That it's going to be a consistent thing that we get to count on this game being there every year. So I have a lot of appreciation and admiration for University of Utah, their athletic department, the students, the faculty, staff, obviously the coaches, the program, and their fans. So it's interesting, the connections. I mean, I have an older brother that played there, and so I have a sister that went to school there, and me and my other siblings came here to BYU, and I don't think I'm really that unique when it comes to family. I know there's a lot of families that are kind of split when it comes to this rivalry, which makes it even more fun. And just looking forward to it. If it weren't for Utah, I wouldn't be here. So and if it weren't for BYU, Coach Witt wouldn't be at Utah. So and we have Utah graduates that are on our staff, and with Jay Hill and Sinipoha and others that have worked there, myself and A-Rod and Justin. And Chad, and I mean, there's a lot and Gary. So there's a lot of connections there. Just really excited that we get to play this game and looking forward to it. But I have a lot of love for that program and a lot of love for people there.
When you guys had that win in the last meeting between you and BYU and Utah, what in 2021 after that victory, like what benefits did you see come from that breakthrough in that rivalry win, whether it off the field, on the field? Like what value did that provide to your program after that win?
Well, when I got the job, that's all the fans wanted to talk to me about is winning that game, So I felt a lot of relief for them, and but the benefits is I think there's we have some amazing football programs in our state, and there's some really cool things that are happening here. When you talk about the economy or people that are moving in here, the sports teams that are available, and we have two amazing ones that are not that far apart, and they're in the same conference, and it's a Power 4 conference. And so this is a really cool thing for all those that are here that are local, and then you're surrounded by amazing other pro football programs, whether it's the FCS level or Utah State up in Logan. And so there's some really cool things happening in the state. I don't know how we can just take it for granted sometimes, and rather than embracing the cool moments that we're in. I mean, I think about this when I was a kid, when I was just a little 8-9-year-old growing up, and just think that in the future there's going to be an opportunity where we're actually in one of these power conferences, the Big 12, and we're in it and in all sports, and that I got my Utah Jazz that are still here, and then you're going to add hockey and all these other things that are here, and that there's a lot of people living here in the state. I mean, that's a real cool thing. So now that we're here, it's I think we ought to take advantage of it, but let's do it different. Let's do it so it can be even more fun.
Mitch, at least I can believe him this week when he says that he's close with Kyle and he's good friends with him. I mean, I get it. And you got to just give them all credit. Like, I mean, these guys are this is a lot. You know what I mean? Like, it's a ton to have to manage. And for Kyle Whittingham right now, he's trying to keep that locker room together. And in Kalani's sake, he's just trying to, like, enjoy every second of this and pretend like, oh, we knew this was happening. But there has to be something to be said about the preparation they do every week. It stays the same. It's worked every week for them. They're not going to deviate at all from it, and that's something that is pretty admirable. His guys every week have been consistently preparing the exact same way.
Kalani has always been viewed as the coach that has, kind of that a little bit of boom or bust, where it's, man, his ceiling is just endless at BYU, but his floor could be catastrophic at times, 2017, last year. But, man, when it gets clicking, and he's got so much ability, and to the point, Alex, I mean, this will probably be something more we talk down the road, but, I think he warrants a contract extension. And, honestly, this is going to be a guy that you wonder if long term, maybe he's an NFL coach where he's just so likable. Like, guys just want to play for him. And you're in a world right now with money being thrown around these players, and they still want to play for him. Like, that's kind of the attributes you'd think of maybe an NFL coach, kind of like Andy Reid, where he's so likable, and just everyone wants to be part of that. And Kalani's culture has been impressive, and it'll be interesting to see if, what he's doing this year creates maybe a little bit of a market where schools want to, get in on that, because now we're learning that just getting guys is not enough. You got to have a culture in this era where money is involved. Kalani is thriving in that, and that's why I think BYU is thriving as well. We got to take a timeout, though. On the other side, we'll get a check-in with BYU player Connor Pay. And First and 12 is always brought to you by Macy's Grocery Store's proud sponsor of First and 12. Happy shopping. Get the freshest fruits and vegetables from your local farms and your favorite local brands. Macy's. Happy shopping. We'll hear from Connor Pay next here on First and 12.
The following is a presentation of KSL Sports. First and 12. A total roundup of BYU and Utah football and the expanded Big 12 Conference. Brought to you by Macy's Grocery Stores. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Alex Kirry on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports Zone.
Welcome back. Happy Sunday to you. Yes, First and 12 right here on KSL News Radio and on the KSL Sports Zone every Sunday. Mitch Harper and myself bringing you a Big 12 breakdown. And, of course, it's a rivalry week edition of the program. And next week at this time, Mitch, we'll be talking about the rivalry game itself, having just experienced it. But this week, all we can do is talk about the what-ifs and what will happen. Connor Pay, BYU's offensive lineman and offensive captain. Guy's been hurt for the last few weeks, had surgery on that foot. Trying to get right for that Utah game. I know it was a goal for him. Don't know if he's going to make it back for that one. But Connor gives you a lot of insight as to kind of where this team's head has been and what's been going right for these guys and what's changed from one year to the next for this BYU Cougars team, who's now undefeated and number 9 in the country. Here's Connor Pay.
Culture hasn't changed since January. It's we're not doing anything different. It's the message was the same. As it has been every week. Kalani gave me the chance to address the team in the locker room before the game. He usually picks one of the captains to come up and speak to the team before we take the field. And, essentially all I told the team is that, we've earned the right to play well Monday through Friday. We had a great, tough week of practice. And, when you practice that way, you earn the right to go out there and be confident. And at that point, all you got to do is just go and execute. And that's what we did. We went out there and we were able to strike first, which is always good. And tried to keep the foot on the pedal for as long as we could. Probably could have done a better job of that in the second half a little bit. Just got a little sloppy up front, a little bit on some of those runs late in the game. We were trying to eat some clock where we probably could have put up some more points, but I think overall the team is just doing a really good job of resetting and compartmentalizing the individual weeks, where it's like, especially now coming up with these next couple weeks, getting ready to play Utah, where it's the last 8 weeks have absolutely no bearing, none, on this game, and the following weeks have no bearing on this game. All we can do is focus on what's right in front of us. And that's what this team's been able to do.
You look at the run game, and we had a lot of conversations last year about the struggles there. It's completely different now, and now it's going to another level. You got LJ with back-to-back 100-yard games.
Yeah.
Can you explain to us what is different with the run game? Why is it working well? And why is LJ getting going now?
Well, I think for one, the obvious change is that we have a new run game coordinator, and so the schemes are a little different. And, he's added some good stuff to us, and, Coach Woods has been awesome. And, obviously having LJ back fully healthy is a big deal too, just because, he's such a smooth and effective runner. But I think just the consistency of the technique and the assignments of the guys up front and tight ends, running backs included, And even the receivers too, and the quarterback. I mean, the run game's an 11-man deal. You can look at any of those explosive runs, and you'll see receivers blocking their butts off. Trying to get those extra yards. And I think obviously there was a massive commitment to the run game in the offseason, and people took that to heart, especially us up front. And so I think just the consistency that Coach Woods brings, and the schemes, and just the way that everybody's bought into it, and now we got LJ and Hinckley had almost an 100-yard game as well. And so I think we have guys that are starting to find their way through this scheme and through this system.
What are you noticing with the defense during practice? I know you focus a lot on the offense, obviously, because that's the side of the ball that you play on. But like, what's going on that side that Jay Hill's got dialed up for those guys that you notice and you go, oh, they're operating? Do you notice like, hey, they're operating at a different level this year? There's something else going on.
Yeah, for sure. Because all of spring ball and all of fall camp, that's all I get to see.
Yeah.
Is their stupid faces. And
it's an ugly bunch.
It's it's been great. I think one more year in Coach Hill's system definitely makes a difference on that front, because now it's you got the guys who are leading the charge on defense, like Jack Kelly and people like that, who are analyzing the formation and making calls based on that, and stuff. And obviously Jack is experienced in this system, having been at Weber. And so now the rest of the guys too have a full year under their belt, where it's like now they're picking up on formational and motion cues faster. But I think even beyond that, I think especially in the front seven, because I felt like the secondary actually played pretty well. All things considered, last year with how banged up they were and some other things, I think the secondary played pretty awesome last season. It was one of the few bright spots of last year's team. And now I think that the front seven is kind of catching up to that, and being the dominant force that Coach Hill wants them to be. Because that was, you may look at the stats and be like, oh man, UCF rushed for 150 or 160 or whatever that was, but that's one of the better rushing teams in America.
Yeah, they were number 2 going into that game.
And I don't know do you know what they were averaging yards per game on the ground? It was
270.
You guys,
I think you kept them 90 under their average.
And they had that last, they were at 150 with like 2.5 minutes left. I mean, the reality was they had already kind of shut down, I think, RJ Harvey, and then. But yeah, that was the very first thing we noticed was, hey, a team that averages 275 yards a game on the ground, 180 was, I think, what they ended up with. But that's a phenomenal day, considering that they can't throw the ball either.
Yeah, no, and so you're holding them almost 100 yards under their average. Yeah. And so that was the defense's goal going in. When you play against great rushing teams, you're not going to hold them to 0. That's just not a deal. The thing that you need to do is limit the chunk runs. You got to limit explosive plays against off rushing attacks like that. The 1, 2, 3 yard gains, even 4 yard gains sometimes, are wins for the defense. And so I think they did a great job, with the exception of a couple plays where they let some big runs out. For the most part,
it's going to happen with the guy who's the number 5 rusher in the country, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's pretty darn good.
Exactly. And so I think just how the only time the defense has struggled this year is when they played outside of themselves and outside of the system. And that's what we saw a little bit against Oklahoma State. I think we talked a little bit about that last week. But I think they're doing just such a good job of playing to their strengths within the system that Coach Hill is teaching, where it's like you can't play outside of what the defense is doing and expect to perform well, because defense is so much about gap and assignment sound. Offenses score points and get chunk yards when guys are either caught out of gaps or caught out of an assignment. And so I think that's what this defense has been really good at, really assignment sound. Everyone's bought into their 1/11th. You don't have to do anything more or anything less than what's expected of you.
Great competitors will use anything they can to their advantage, anything to motivate themselves. I'm curious if you guys, locker room coaches, whatever, tried to use the 2.5-point underdog thing as motivation against UCF. We were shocked, couldn't understand it. And now it looks even more silly. But What do you guys do to motivate yourselves, and did you use that to motivate yourself in Orlando?
Sure. I mean, seeing that, you can't help but feel a little bit disrespected, right? But
Yeah.
that the Vegas, what Vegas wants, what the media says, and all that stuff matters a whole lot less than the expectations that we put on ourselves. And so, sure, that might be like the icing on the cake, right? If you needed a little extra juice or a little extra motivation, but the core, we're intrinsically motivated, not extrinsically motivated, you know?
I love those weekly check-ins with Connor on your show, Alex. They're great stuff always with Connor Pay, and hopefully he can get back for that Utah game. It'd be great if he could. But the good thing is for BYU is that his absence has not derailed their success. Bruce Mitchell's been a star, I think.
TJ Woods has been a phenomenal offensive line coach. Their scheme is just totally different, and that's been the big vibe this year that he's talked about. Is all those guys are ready, man, because TJ Woods. That was the big disparity on that O-line last year, was just coaching and scheme.
Yeah, it's been night and day difference from last year, and it's a big reason why BYU's 8-0 and Connor Pay still, even on the road, he's on his scooter, hauling around in Florida last week, helping be as much of a coach as he can with this team. But hopefully we see him soon suiting up for the Cougs. We're taking our final timeout. Next, we'll get to what's next on the Big 12 schedule along with the rivalry game. It's a loaded week as the chase for the Big 12 title heats up. We're going to be breaking it all down next here on First and 12. Mitch Harper, Alex Kirry. This show brought to you by Macy's. Get the freshest fruits and vegetables here at Macy's. Happy shopping. More after this on First and 12.
JJ and Alex are deep in Utah strategy and reaction. What the Utes did right and what they need to do better. JJ and Alex, Monday from 3 to 6 on the KSL Sports Zone.
Welcome back, everybody. Final segment on First and 12, a rivalry week, pre-rivalry week edition of First and 12. I say rivalry week, of course, here in the state of Utah. We talk a lot about the Big 12 on this program because that's what this program's theme is. But, of course, with our two local teams, BYU and Utah, both in the Big 12 and both facing off against one another as conference mates for the first time in, Mitch, this would be something you'd remember. When was the last time they actually played against one another when they were members of the same conference, BYU and Utah?
2010. It was 17-16. BYU was up 16-zip, and then Utah reeled off 17 unanswered and blocked a Mitch Payne field goal, and Utah had the first of a 9-game win streak.
The 9-game win streak, by the way, both teams have had 9-game win streaks in this series. Nobody's ever won more than 9 in a row. Both teams have done it. And but you've got yourself quite a bit of fun to be had this week. I do think that this rivalry has taken on a totally new field to it now that they're in the conference together. Now that Kalani and Kyle, two guys who actually like each other, are at the helm, and both have ties to both schools. Like, that's the other thing. Connor Pay, we just heard from, and he talked about, I got a bunch of friends up there, and I want to kick those guys' butts. He's like, I want to kick my friend, the ones I know the most up there, I want to kick their butts the most. So that's where you want this rivalry game, and obviously that's a lot of fun for us to be able to jump into. But the Big 12 has a lot more this week that's on the line. It's not just in BYU and Utah. Now the conference race hits kind of that final stretch. And you're not going to see as many bye weeks the rest of the way out here. You're going to see a lot of teams trying to figure out how to find their way to Arlington. So let's jump in here and let's get an idea of what we have schedule-wise for the Big 12 this weekend, Mitch.
Yeah, Iowa State goes on the road. They play Kansas. A lot of these games still got the 6-day flex, so we'll find out a little bit later today the kick times. But the Cyclones go on the road to a Kansas team that's playing a little bit better, but still a far cry from what we expected in the preseason. And then Colorado at Texas Tech. Colorado is a team that, has played a weak Big 12 conference schedule, similar to BYU. Pretty much all losing records, the teams they've faced in the Big 12. They've capitalized, though, and now they take on a Texas Tech team that passing defense is not their strength. They cannot stop anyone through the air, and that's got to be good news for Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, I don't know about Colorado. Like, I don't know what to think about them, and I don't want to think that I don't know. Coach Prime, you and I joke a lot. We try to get that guy in the program as much as we can. Any soundbite we can get from Coach Prime, we'll take it. But the reality is that you can't deny that he has definitely turned things around for that program. And
no doubt.
I don't love admitting it because I don't love the way that they've done things there. But I have to give credit where credit's due. The future head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, Prime, is doing a phenomenal job. So.
He really is, though. I mean, to take a Colorado program that was left for dead
right
at one win and to get them to this spot, I mean, you knew that his arrival would instantly bring national attention, but they're pretty good this year. I mean, there's still some questions in the trench. I think that's kind of the thought for a lot of people is what would they do if, they play maybe an Iowa State or a BYU, but they've taken care of business, and they have a win over a Baylor team that was, trending up now as of late in the Big 12. So Colorado at Texas Tech will be one to watch. UCF goes on the road at Arizona State. UCF's had, a lot of changes. They just had their space game yesterday. Now they take on the Arizona State Sun Devils. West Virginia at Cincinnati. That's kind of a force-fed rivalry, but I don't think either fan base really wants to call it that.
No, but I will say that West Virginia is just one of these teams that I'm waiting for them to really take off. They've just had such a difficult schedule this year, and I think that they've people sort of dismissed them because they have those 4 losses against 4 teams that are almost undefeated. Most of them were undefeated throughout most of the year here, so it's kind of crazy. Oklahoma State, looking for their first conference win, going to Fort Worth to take on TCU. That one's going to be an interesting one there in Fort Worth. TCU, I mean, I can't hate on Sonny Dykes that much. He's kind of turned some things around a little bit this year, and I'm glad that they figured a couple things out because I like Sonny Dykes in Fort Worth, man.
Me too, and I think that he's a good fit there, and they got a. They got the chance to be one of the pleasant storylines in the Big 12 down the home stretch. But it's an interesting week of Big 12 play, and you brought up West Virginia and their schedule. It's going to be the first game back for their new defense coordinator. Neil Brown kind of shuffled up the deck with their coordinator situation. So we'll see if that pays off for them to finish strong, because it always seems like that Mountaineer fan base wants to fire Neil Brown if he can finish strong. I think that could bode well. And I think it's, we're getting to that point, Alex, where it's getting the hot seat season, but I kind of wonder if we're going to get to a point where, these schools are going to back off, firing coaches because of revenue sharing on the horizon. They're a little bit worried about paying out this $22 million a year.
Yeah, we had this discussion this week because JJ and I were talking about Lincoln Riley, and he goes, "Hey, dude, how long until they fire him?" I go, "Here's the thing, though. The buyout, I looked it up. Yeah. It's $90 million for Lincoln Riley." And I thought even USC, USC's not Georgia, USC's not Texas A&M, USC's not Florida, where they're just going to be like, hey, let's look at one of our rich donors, which they, of course, have. But at the same time, they're like, look, we're a private institution. You made your bed here a little bit. We're going to let this thing get whittled down. And yeah, you're right. Schools are looking around and they're going, hey, I don't think we can just on a whim fire a guy and have to end up paying him out for the next couple of years. I look at Kansas, you look at Lance Leipold, and he's just going to have to fire some assistants. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Some of these coaches, they save their own jobs and their own butts by letting a coordinator go, and that kind of saves them a couple more extra years there. But yeah, I don't think schools are very prone to just being like, oh, you're gone after 2 or 3 years on your $50 million, and we're going to have to pay you 35 of it, and you coach like crap. It's such a weird concept. I'd love to get into that business, but that's just what it is.
But the highlight game is definitely going to be BYU and Utah, 8:15 kick. It'll be on ESPN. We'll have coverage throughout the day on the KSL Sports Zone and KSL News Radio. And it's going to be just a busy day from us, from really morning to the early hours of the next morning. We are going to be holding it down. Then we'll be back next Sunday here with First and 12, giving you a recap of BYU and Utah and all of the Big 12 conference action in this league that just continues to produce great storylines. And First and 12 is always brought to you by Macy's Grocery Store. Get the freshest fruits and vegetables from local farms and your favorite local brands. Macy's. Happy shopping. Big thanks to our producer, Eric Cabrera. Big thanks to you, Alex Kirry, and appreciate all of you listening to the show and subscribe to the podcast. We'll talk to you next week here on First and 12.